to open because there's a revised text. All right, so I'm going to call this meeting of the Southborough Historical Commission to order. Pursuant to Senate Bill 2475, which was signed into law by Governor Baker on June 16, 2021, this meeting of the Southborough Historical Commission will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by the members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at https://www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner by finding the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. So we are a little late, but that's okay. We had some technological problems that haven't prevented the landing of the plane. So hello, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Nice to see you again. All right, we're going to try to speed through our agenda so that we have everything ready to go for 6 o'clock. And if so, what we'll do is we'll simply move on to the next meeting item and then come back to this. But I hope to get this through even in 15 minutes because we don't have that much to talk about. First, election of officers. This is the first thing on the agenda. I would be happy to continue as your valiant captain if you, the pirate band, consent to allow me to do so. Given all the confusion over Rebecca's reappointment, she was just reappointed yesterday. I had talked to her about whether she wanted to continue as vice chair or how we wanted to actually do that all. She is not committal, if I'm speaking that, she's fine with not being vice chair. I asked Jim this, he's not excited about being vice chair. I asked Mr. Kevin about being vice chair and he gracefully consented to be vice chair. So I think the first thing to do would be to do a election vote for chair, of which I can't participate, but I'll second the motion, take a motion for that.
I will motion, move to have Michael continue as chair.
All right, and I'll take a second.
Second.
All right, so we have Rebecca Deans-Rowe.
Yes.
Kate Battles.
Yes.
Jim Blaschke.
Yes.
Kevin Miller.
Yes.
All right, there we go. Now I will entertain a motion to elect Mr. Kevin Miller as vice chair of the Historical Commission.
Second.
Well, I need a motion first.
Oh, sorry. So moved.
So moved. Okay. And
second.
Seconded by Mr. Blaschke. All right, let us have a vote then. Rebecca Deans-Rowe.
Yes.
Jim Blaschke.
Yes.
Kate Battles.
Yes.
Waisan says yes, and Kevin Miller says?
I think I abstain of my own.
You abstain. and I think also just for clarity's purposes, I abstained in the last vote as well. I don't think I actually mentioned that, but do you think we have to take that vote again just for safety's sake?
Oh, it wouldn't hurt.
All right. I'll entertain a motion again, just for safety's sake, to make sure that we've done this correctly about the chair. So
I move that Michael Waisan remain as chair or serve again as chair.
there we go. One. Okay. Second.
I'll second.
Okay. Rebecca Deans-Rowe.
Yes.
Jim Blaschke.
Yes.
Kevin Miller.
Yes.
Kate Battles.
Yes.
Waisan abstains. Okay, election of officers completed. Number 3 on the agenda is the public meeting, which we're not ready to do yet. Number 4.
Sorry, Michael.
What?
I don't mean to interrupt you, but we need a treasurer. That's we have to reappoint the treasurer, unfortunately, as well.
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry.
I'm happy to give that up to somebody.
No.
I've been doing it for 5 years.
No.
I have. And my appointment is up in June, so if somebody wants to learn how to do this.
No, you have a whole year. We'll worry about it later. Sorry, I forgot about treasurer, so we will actually do that. I nominate Kate Battles to continue as treasurer. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
There we go.
That's okay.
And so now, my merry band, Rebecca Deans-Rowe,
Yes.
Jim Blaschke,
Yes.
Kevin Miller,
Yes.
my son says aye, and Kate Battles
Abstain.
abstains. Okay.
Sorry.
Yay.
I mean, I did, it was a pipe dream that somebody else was gonna do it anyway. It's okay.
You
Exactly.
did such a good job, Kate.
Thank you.
Exactly. And Annie, who's not here, of course, will continue as our CPC representative, which is not an elective office. Now, am I correct in assuming that we have, those are the three officers that need nomination? Okay. Okay,
We
so,
have a paid recording secretary, so we don't have to appoint him.
okay, very good. Public meeting at 6, so we'll move on to this. I have sent you all on item number 4, a draft of the proposed new rules and regulations, as well as a draft of proposed changes to the demolition delay bylaw. I sent them to you simply to look over them. I'm not going to open this to discussion this evening. What I would like to do with your consent is to apply to Mark Purple to have these sent to town council to look at and ask him to join us at, if not our next meeting, because we're going to be called back sooner than later for a permit we just received on Edge Hill Road demolition, but perhaps at some other meeting very quickly after that. So that would be my intent. I just wanted to get these out there. They'll be attached to the minutes for public review ahead of time. And I just want to make sure that everyone feels we're being suitably transparent about these issues. So we'll put that up. I don't, go ahead, Jim.
Question, are you looking for any feedback on these documents?
Not now. I think we'll just put it up there for now. I mean, do you have something to say? I wasn't really going to discuss it this evening.
I was take an action item to go through those, and if you want any red lines or suggestions, I can do that. The question is, at what state do you feel these are in? If you feel they're final and it's an up or down, let me know what you.
No, it's not a final, but they've been, pretty thoroughly hashed over. So, I mean, we can take a look at that, I think, maybe in the meeting. What I'd like to do is send this to town council. They had suggested that we start de novo, in a sense, from the very beginning with a blank slate. Since we had done so much work on this already, what I thought would be advisable is to give them the work that we had and then let town council take a look at it and then go over that with him. Especially since he's a new town council and that, we don't know anything about this. So I guess I just wanted to launch them out to you in a public format for now, and then have this be a subject of an entire meeting later on.
Okay.
I think we could probably make a motion, Michael, to approve that the chair submit them for town council review.
That sounds fine. I'll entertain that motion. Second,
Second,
Rebecca Deans-Rowe,
yes.
Jim Blaschke,
Yes.
Kevin Miller,
Yes.
Kate Battles.
Yes.
Very good. Okay.
Michael Weisman.
Can
Michael
I
Weisson. Yeah, Michael Weisson says aye. Sorry, I'm kind of out of this. Kevin Miller. Yes, sir.
just add a point about this? Because I think it's obviously immensely important to us and to the town that I would regard sending the documents off to town council as a very good idea. Obviously, I just voted for it, and as a way of expediting the conversation, because I think we do have significant conversation to be had about the documents and about the language and about some of the philosophical underpinnings of them. And so I look at it not less as expecting that town council is going to go great, but that it'll be a way of speeding up the conversation that we need to have. And so, yeah, I'm all for spending a good deal of time in a meeting fully devoted to the subject.
Yeah,
So-
I totally agree. I just thought that since we talked about this at previous meetings, we've now heard considerable feedback, to give it a more pleasant term, from various members of the Board of Selectmen and other people about the previous regulations. So we've kind of adopted these to see, let's float this out there, see what people have to say, send it out to the public, get feedback, think about it ourselves. And I really think that it would be worthwhile to dedicate, as I say, a full meeting to this, to discuss this, as the limitations of this bylaw, what can be done, what can't be done, et cetera, and so forth. In the meantime, we are operating without rules and regulations. However, I don't think that this will be a very long time, that this will be a blank slate. You know, hopefully we can get some feedback from council fairly quickly. He seems very responsive, and you know, bring this out. I do want to make sure, however, to avoid any criticism of this about these hidden documents on town website, et cetera, and so forth, that this is not indeed the case. You know, these things were there for 6 years on the town website. No one complained about it at all. So now, you know, we're making sure that everyone knows exactly what's what. And so no one can say, wow, you know, you did this and didn't consult town council, you're misinterpreting this, or et cetera, et cetera. So that's my plan. Does anyone have any more thoughts on that or discussion that they want to?
Yeah, just a question. So the demolition delay bylaw proposed changes, as it says, it's not, at least in the copy I'm looking at, it doesn't indicate the extent of the changes. Were there many markups or differences in the way this is worded?
So I will send you guys the tracking document so you can see the changes between the two. There are extensive changes. Among them, it takes out the 1925 time period and implements a floating range of, I forget how many years, so that it rolls up with history. It expands the time frame, so we're not trapped in this 10-day thing with the building commissioner about responding to these demolition permits, because it's been judged by town council that we cannot appoint a member to handle this, an agent essentially, without changes to the bylaw. The bylaw makes that change so that we can actually have an agent and not have to convene. It takes out the language that was contested the last time around about, you know, bona fide, you know, business, and puts it where it's supposed to be in a different format in the rules and regulations. And most importantly, it implements a penalty system for people who tear down buildings without getting a demolition delay permit. And I think that's the most important change to this, because as we saw, there was sort of a blatant disregard for this process and much confusion on the part of the building department about, you know, what constitutes demolition, what constitutes building. So it straightens out some of that language and enforces this. You know, in my discussions with various people and other historical commissions across the state and you know, various authorities on these type of regulations, what has become very clear in all of this is that these demolition delay bylaws are fairly weak tools, and that the real work needs to be in historic districting and other means of preservation. So I think, you know, the demolition delay bylaw was a great thing. But I think we're a little overly reliant on it as a preservation tool here in Southborough. And so hopefully that this will be a starting point to get this straightened out. And it also, by the way, another change is that it uses the rules and regulations to put the things that may change, like percentage of demolition, et cetera, and so forth, into a document that can be changed easily, as opposed to changing the bylaw. And because I would like this to be the last bylaw change for this demolition delay bylaw, right? For my history of living in Southborough, because we fiddled with this now twice, minor changes just on delay. And also, I will say, one of the changes is also the reporting mechanism about reporting to newspapers and sending out and blah, blah, blah. I mean, obviously that's completely antiquated. There are no local newspapers anymore. No one reads them. So these notifications are kind of crazy. So we've reformed that, and you can take a look at that and then, you know, give me your thoughts and feelings, and we'll all discuss this maybe preliminarily with us together before town council or with town council altogether. I don't know. However,
if you can send, again, if you can send the marked up version, that'll make it easier on the review. Just, I know we've got minutes before 6, just procedurally with a new edition of the DDBL, does it have to go up to a town meeting for adoption? And does it?
Yeah, it has to go back. And I have no intention to bring it up in this November meeting, which I think is going to be very contentious. Also, I don't think it'll be ready, frankly, because I think the close is when, Kate, very soon, right? 18th of October or something like that. Oh, you're on mute, dear. Kate, we can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry. I believe it's 3 weeks before town meeting, and town meeting right now is scheduled for November 1st. So
Okay.
yeah, it's right around then.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's not going to be ready for prime time.
Well, where I was going with the question is, if it has to be approved at a town meeting, are the options either take the new one or turn down the new one? Does the old one remain, or does the whole process maybe go out the window? What are the possible truth table out?
Well, I don't think, okay, so I'd have to confirm this, but I don't think you can throw the baby out with the bathwater. So you can't get rid of the whole thing. You could, however, choose not to make these amendments, or you could make other amendments to the existing. Considering the type of changes that we're making here in terms of changing the language about building inspector, building commissioner, doing the dates and timelines, I think the two most important things, and potentially contentious or not, things will be the floating scale of the dates. And I think there's a very good reason that we can present at town meeting for that I think is acceptable, hopefully, to our townspeople. And the penalty portion, which was not there before. So there may be some conversation around that. That being said, I think there's a lot of work to do, because not only do we have to have these only rules and regulations, but we also have to have a revised bylaw. So,
Michael, what's the process for enacting the rules and regulations and having them be enforced? Do we have to?
those just need to be reviewed by town council, and they need to be voted on by us, and then they become enforced. And then we send them also to Jim Haggerty, so that he is aware of what and has them on file there. But as you see, that they've been fairly stripped down. It's a fairly minor process in the rules and regulations. The other thing is, one of the things that is an addition also in this new demolition delay bylaw is it took out of the rules and regulations the clause about having all the permits on hand before demolition could occur, and put that into the bylaw where it actually needs to be. That can't be in the rules and regulations. So I've done a lot of consulting work with folks very knowledgeable about this, and Mass Historical, et cetera, around these issues. So I think we are fairly clear about what can go into these rules and regulations and what cannot, and what needs to go into the bylaw and what can't. So hopefully this will be the last go around on all of this. So now my question is, how do we bring our folks up from Mass Historical? I hope it's going to be Ben. Do we see Ben out there anywhere?
Yes.
We do. Bring him up, Ben. Let's bring him up as a panelist. All right, allowed to talk. And there we go. Ben, we can
Hi,
see.
everyone.
Hello. Are we supposed to be able to see you?
I got a notification that I was unmuted, but I didn't get anything about being
Hang
able to-
on. Oh yeah, we're gonna promote you here. Let's see. Why do I not have you? Okay, more. Promote to panelist. That should bring you up.
Okay.
There you go. Are you with us, sir?
Yeah.
There you are. Hello,
Hi.
Ben. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
All the back and forth.
Yeah.
We were a little nervous because we had not had the technology going here for us.
Oh, yeah.
Our first time out. Normally we have a supervisor from the town of Southborough, but this was our first time flying solo. And let's just say it wasn't Lindbergh crossing the Atlantic. Anyway, so we're going to move on to the public meeting portion, item number 3 at 6 p.m., a special joint session with the Massachusetts Historical Commission to discuss the final approval of the Downtown National Register District nomination. So Ben, take it away.
Sure. So I'll introduce myself. My name's Ben Haley. I'm a preservation planner at the Mass Historical Commission. I work mostly on the National Register program, and that's why I'm here tonight. I'm going to give two brief presentations. One, an overview of the proposed historic district. This is in advance of the September 8th State Review Board meeting of the Massachusetts Historical Commission, where the commissioners who make up the State Review Board will be presented with also a short little presentation about the district, and then vote on it after having read about it and discussed it if they want to. I see no potential issues there. It's generally a formality. So, but in advance of districts with 50 or more owners, we usually hold a public meeting, and so that's what this is, just to go out to the community and do sort of face-to-face as much as we can these days and take any questions. So the process is this meeting, and then in a couple of weeks we'll have the September 8th meeting, at which point there'll be a final edit and review, and then it will be sent to the Park Service for their review and hopefully final listing. So I'll talk briefly about the district. Normally the consultant who prepared the nomination would discuss the district, but he couldn't be here. So I will do that. And then after that, I will give a more general presentation about the National Register program, just to familiarize people who may not be super familiar with it. And after that, I'm happy to discuss anything, answer questions, whatever. So I'll just get started if that works. So, all right. I do need to share my screen though.
You're muted, dear.
Okay, how do we get Ben to allow his screen sharing? Do you have any idea?
We make him a co-host?
I did make him make him a co-host. That's it. Well,
Okay.
he's promoted to panelist. He should be able to share his screen, but let's make him a co-host.
All right, here we go.
Okay.
Oh, great. Yep, that works. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, so hopefully you can all see this. It's just a blue screen. It says Southborough Center Historic District. Okay, so again, just a brief kind of overview of the proposed district. I'm not going to go through every property and go deep into the history. You guys all live there. You probably know it way better than I do, but it's just to give you an overview of what's in the district. So the proposed Southborough Center District, and here is the kind of rough in black, the boundary outline, is significant as a distinctive surviving example of a New England town center that originated in the early 18th century, and that reflects, as many of them do, the growth and evolution of a community over the course of the centuries, 2.5+ centuries. Located at the crossroads of regional routes connecting it to Worcester and Boston, as well as neighboring towns, some of the early surviving elements from this early period in the 18th century include the town's first cemetery. There's a view of it here. And the town common, which is off to the side here, which is an early feature of the town. The town pound is in the vicinity, another early feature. This area also served as a service and trade center for surrounding towns or surrounding farms for grists and sawmills that were on Stony Brook, which is now flooded. And in the 19th century, Southborough, this part of Southborough functioned as the center of government and church functions, while industry kind of was in different parts of town. The creation of two private academies, the Fay School and St. Mark's School in the 1860s, brought an educational focus to the town center. And this kind of new genteel status in the mid-19th century attracted other kinds of people, summer visitors, summer residents, retirees, and many of them were associated with the schools. And this kind of revitalized the center of Southborough and changed it in ways that it hadn't been before. And it also resulted in more development in the town center. The schools and the larger homes in the center employed professional staff and service personnel who lived in older sections of town and in peripheral neighborhoods. And so some of the center's significant examples of civic architecture you can see in this picture, right? You have you kind of arrayed around the town common. You have St. Mark's Episcopal Church on the left from 1863, and the townhouse next door in brick from just a few years later, 1870, both designed by an architect, Alexander Este. And beyond that, the Pilgrim Congregational Church, which the framing of which and perhaps other elements date to the early 19th century, but which was substantially renovated in a kind of a Romanesque style in the late 1850s. Talking about architecture, and historic districts are not just about the buildings and their architecture, but Southborough has a nice array of especially 19th and early 20th century buildings, and the center contains a distinctive, arrangement of a variety of property types and styles. All of the buildings date to the 19th century or later. It includes some of the civic buildings I told you, designed by architects. As well as residential buildings reflecting various vernacular architectural styles, especially in central Massachusetts, a number of which are associated with local builders and carpenters who lived either in the district or in the area. The earliest houses in Southborough, the surviving 18th century buildings, those are not in the district, but they are also notable. But what we're talking about here, basically start with the early 19th century. And the oldest building in the district it's behind this tree. It's a cape, early 19th century cape, about 1805, the Bannister House. It's a classic cape, 1.5 story center chimney, what they call a full cape now. And that's considered the oldest building in the district. In 1811, a carpenter and a builder, Moses Newton, built a 2-story house at 15 Main Street with a center hall plan and a hipped roof in the Federal style. And this was kind of an advertisement for his skills. And that's this house that you see here. It's a notable example in the district. And directly across the street, he also built a house 15 years later. It's the house on the right. It's with a similar form, although it's been modified slightly, for the Thornton family. And it was subsequently owned by members of the Newton family. Moving along chronologically a bit, representing the mid-19th century especially are a number of Greek Revival houses in the district of varying sizes. These are two of the more sizable ones and the more notable ones. At the western end of the district, so just off the common, the brothers and also carpenters, the Curtis and Solomon Hyde, built a substantial home for themselves in the middle of the 19th century in the 1850s. Curtis Hyde's house in the foreground here, it's a very elegant cross gable, crosswing Greek Revival style house with a monumental portico with double height Doric columns. It's a very distinctive building in the district. And then with the growth of the center's 2 private schools after the Civil War, the community expanded with newcomers that were employed there or in related commercial enterprises. New houses were built along Main Street, but also on farmland that was subdivided south of Main Street along 3 existing streets, Middle Street, Corderville, and Ladisquama Roads, that extended down to Stony Brook. And of course, that part of Stony Brook was inundated in 1897 by the Sudbury Reservoir. But this period is where you see a lot of pattern book houses, Victorian pattern book style, Victorian style pattern book houses in a range of sizes, styles, and elaboration that were very compatible with the local context. And examples on Main Street include these 2 houses, an 1870s Italian house at left, and a slightly later Queen Anne style house on the right. Another grouping of later 19th century, getting into the turn of the 20th century houses include these 2 on Ladisquama Road, the Works and the Ball houses. These 2, just to show you how they kind of blend together, on Main Street, you have the Fairbanks house at left, a Queen Anne style house, along with an older and modest Greek Revival house, and very much showing how two distinctive 19th century styles very much blend together and kind of are exemplify the mixed architectural character of the village, which really expanded in the second half of the 19th century. After the turn of the 20th century, the Colonial Revival everywhere, but even in Southborough too, tended to be the choice for homes, especially for homes of the affluent. Also, those who were interested in the history of where they lived or the history of New England architecture, they tended to design in a Colonial Revival style. And so here at left, you have one of these larger Colonial Revival houses in the district. And a noteworthy building, in addition to the center and to the district from this early 20th century period, is the Southborough Public Library, which moved from a room in the townhouse to this building, Classical Revival building, built in 1911 to designs by an architect based in Philadelphia, Alfred Cass, due to the largesse of Francis Fay. Speaking of donations to the town and local largesse in the early 20th century, we also have the Southborough Community House. This was donated, so it predates the 1920s, but in the 1922, it was donated by Charles Choate to the community, and an addition was added for use by the local American Legion Post. And then looking at the private schools for a moment, in this period, the Fay School acquired a building, the Winchester Arms at 48 Main Street on the Common in the mid-1920s, and replaced it with a Colonial Revival style building, what you see here, a dormitory and dining hall designed by a Boston architect, Edward Sylvester. Similar period, similar style, masonry, Colonial Revival, in this case, very distinctly Georgian, is this 1930 high school annex. It has had a change in use since then, but it was built as the high school annex in 1930. And then speaking of residential architecture, as we move into the middle decades of the 20th century, 20s on, 20s, 30s, 40s, similar period. So domestically, people were building in Colonial Revival styles, as I said, starting in the early 20th century, but here you have a slightly later version. You have a cape on one of these side streets on Lattisquama Road. So that is a widespread trend, also evident in Southborough. And also you have a larger Colonial Revival example. This is the O'Leary House, just up the road from the other one I showed you. Now, the period of significance for the district begins in 1727, when the town was established, and when there are some early extant features like the Common, the town pound, things like that. And it ends in 1964, which is when the post office, now the former post office here at left, was completed. And so this is the last building built in the district during the period of significance. After this, a few more buildings were built, including two in 1978, a dormitory for the Fay School and a firehouse. But largely, the resources in the district, the buildings especially, date to before 1964 or earlier. And they retain their historic integrity, and they convey the historic significance of a New England town center. So that is my brief presentation about Southborough. I can just proceed to talk about the National Register unless anyone has questions. It's kind of what I plan to do.
Questions, anyone?
Let me know what you think.
Anyone in the audience want to raise their hand and ask a question?
I do. This is Jim. The boundary you showed for the district, is that
Yep.
always been the same boundary? Has it ever changed? And what was the original basis for that boundary?
I was not part of the original discussions for the boundary. I believe, so for many village centers, town centers, inevitably there might be at some point an arbitrary cutoff if there isn't something very clear. I believe in this case, it was the goal was to capture the kind of the civic core of the city, some of the residential development that had occurred in later decades and early 20th century, and then also portions of the private schools that make the Southborough such a distinctive place. And so and then also the cemeteries. which are part of a different part of the history, but part of the history of it as the civic center of the town. So does that make sense?
Yes, mostly, but I guess the part of the question I was asking also is the historic district as described currently in place, or is it something that's been submitted for acceptance?
So we have it's in, no, it has not been accepted. So the process is it's in draft form. It's going to be sent to the Park Service within a few months. So next month is the meeting. We'll do a final review of it, and then we'll process it on our end, and then we will submit it to the National Park Service. They have a review and comment period, and then if there are no hiccups, then it gets listed and it will be a National Register district rather than just an identified area in the state inventory.
Okay.
So it'll have it. So it's inventoried. The inventory form exists. It's an inventoried area, but it doesn't have a historic designation.
Got it. And the other thing that may or may not be related, but there's been also town development work on a downtown district. Is that independent of this, or does any relationship between the two districts?
I don't know.
There should be, but there isn't. We're working on that, but that's not a topic for discussion right now.
Okay.
Can I just throw in something?
Yeah.
I'll probably repeat myself, but it would merit it. And I am over the moon to have been here and to listen to him speak. And I would love to hear more. I regard this process as just an immense opportunity, and not just because I happen to live in the district, but I consider it this and just incalculably valuable opportunity for the town as a whole. This is the sort of first step, and I know it's been a long time coming, and others before me have put in some very, very hard work on this over the years, and Michael, I can speak to that at some point, and I'm sure he will. But the chance that we have now with the unbelievably wonderful assistance of Mass Historical is just something that I just want to get out front in terms of applauding, because I just think it's such a wonderful, wonderful moment for all of us, everybody in the town. I imagine that somebody who lives maybe outside the boundaries of the district might not be quite as head over heels as I am living inside of it. But I think once it's all digested, that everybody in town is going to take an immense amount of pride from this as a step forward of recognition of the history and the value of that history to Southborough. And so I just, I'm going to say it again, but thank you, Ben, for being here. I'm
of course, yeah,
beyond thrilled. And tell us more.
So I'll, I can with that, I can go into a general presentation about the National Register. So for those of you who aren't super familiar with what it is and what it isn't, I can do that. And after that, if you guys have any more questions, happy to answer them or discuss anything. So I'll just do that. Maybe that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. So you can all see this, I assume. Great. So the National Register of Historic Places, a public informational meeting. Just a little bit of background. The National Register of Historic Places, it was established in 1966 as part of the National Historic Preservation Act. I'll go into a little bit more depth about that in a moment, but just as an introduction. Massachusetts has the second largest number of listings in the National Register in the country. The only one with more is Virginia. We have more than 75,000 properties listed, and there are well over 1,700 historic districts, and they range in size from a couple of buildings to hundreds of properties. As examples, there's photographs throughout of just examples of what I'm talking about at that particular moment. So Harvard Avenue Historic District in Boston, that's an older district in Boston, and Fort Hill Park in Lynn are just some examples of resources in the National Register. The Massachusetts Historical Commission, which is chaired by the Secretary of the Commonwealth, William Francis Galvin, was established in 1963 with the mission to identify, evaluate, and protect the significant historic and archaeological assets of the Commonwealth. It is the office of the State Historic Preservation Officer, as well as the state archaeologist. So the National Historic Preservation Act, just a little background on that. It was created in 1966. It was one of Lyndon Johnson's sort of Great Society programs. And it created a national preservation policy. There had not been one before. And that policy kind of outlined procedures, policies within the act and goals, and among other things, created state historic preservation offices. So the Mass Historical Commission was actually founded a couple of years before this act was passed. And when it was passed, the Mass Historical Commission became the State Historic Preservation Office, which is usually just called the SHPO, said by its acronym. And among the programs created through the act was the National Register of Historic Places, one of the sort of preservation planning programs that came out of it. And on the right here is a picture of Old Penn Station in New York. I just show that because the mid-60s, late 50s into the mid-60s was a time of great change in this country, urban renewal, the loss of monumental buildings like Penn Station, which was not because of urban renewal, but was a major loss and was one of these catalyzing moments for preservationists. And so the mid-60s is seen as a time where these things came to a head and led to the passage of the act. Now, the National Register contains a variety of resources, including downtowns. So an urban downtown like the Washington Street Shoe Historic District in Lawrence, rural areas like this farm in Brookfield, residential neighborhoods. A recent listing in Boston is the Esmond Street Historic District, industrial areas. Most of downtown Lowell is listed in the National Register. Many former industrial areas are. Very old properties, including the first period Blake House in Boston from the 1660s, and relatively new ones. Now it's over 80 years old, but this is the second house designed by Walter Gropius in the United States after he left Germany, and it's the first commission that he had. The first house he built was his own, which is now the museum owned by Historic New England. Public properties are listed in the National Register, like this school building in Shirley, and private ones like this nice little gambrel roofed cape in Gloucester. In Southborough, some of the existing properties in the National Register include a building associated with the Southborough School for Girls, the JDC Bradley House, which was listed a little over 20 years ago, as well as the South Union School in the south part of town, listed a decade ago. And then other, I wasn't going to show the map here, but resources associated with the Wachusett Aqueduct and the Sudbury Reservoir were also listed 30 years ago in the 1990s. That's a long linear district that goes through multiple towns, and it has to do with the historic resources associated with those features. In addition to buildings, the National Register includes sites. So the old settlers' burial ground in Lancaster, an 18th century cemetery recently listed. Structures, Carousel and Holyoke, an early 20th century carousel. The Mayflower II, which was listed earlier this year, late last year, which was built in the 1950s as a replica of the Mayflower, and now it's back at Plymouth. Objects, including street clocks. Many downtowns had street clocks. Some are listed in the National Register. Milestones. There are many, many, many milestones going back to the early 18th century in Massachusetts, and many of them are listed in the National Register. And statues, like this statue by Catherine Lane Weems at Harvard. And districts. So districts are, there are many districts, as I've said. Wendelltown Common is a kind of a rural village center district in central Western Mass. And a district in Springfield, an urban example, is the Outing Park district in Springfield. Districts are, as you may guess, ensembles. They're a mix of buildings, structures, sites, and objects, and together those things tell a story, and they form a cultural landscape. Some properties are eligible for listing only in a district. and others are listed individually. So for instance, on the left here, you have a row of turn of the 20th century apartment buildings in a neighborhood of Boston. Now, individually, these are not eligible for the National Register, right? They probably have had a number of modifications over the years, inside and out. They may no longer individually retain historic integrity, but not only that, individually, they may not tell the story that they tell collectively. And so as a collection, they tell a number of stories, which is possibly immigrant history, the history of the development of this part of Boston. They may reflect particular architectural styles that were dominant at this particular moment. So collectively, they tell a story that they couldn't tell on their own. And then individually, as an example, this house in Northampton, it's a modest mid-19th century house, but it is individually eligible also because it was owned and occupied for a good portion of its early existence by two two escaped and then freed slaves who were helped along by abolitionists. And they moved to Florence, Massachusetts, which is part of Northampton, which was a hotbed of abolitionist activity in the decade or two before the Civil War. Some properties are eligible for both. They're eligible individually and as part of a district. An example here is in Roxbury, in the Roxbury Highlands National Register District, but it is also individually listed. This is the Alva Kittredge House. It's a very fine Greek Revival mansion. So to be eligible for listing in the National Register, what has to happen, or what happens? So resources or areas, so an individual house or an area like a town center, they're evaluated for National Register eligibility based on documentation provided in inventory forms. And usually that's MHC doing the evaluation. In towns that are certified local governments, the historical commission of the town does a first pass at evaluation and then sends it to us, and we concur or disagree or ask for more information. So, but MHC generally has the final determination there. Area forms is what this looks like. This is an area form. This is the Southborough Center area form. So this is what was evaluated 6 years ago or so. And when it was determined that this was eligible for the National Register, this is the cover form. And the nomination was based in part on this document. Resources or areas, they must meet at least one of the 4 National Register criteria for significance. I'll go through those in a moment. And they must be able, or they must retain sufficient integrity to be able to convey their significance. And I'll talk about what that means too. So criterion A, the first of the 4, has to do with events and patterns of development or broad patterns of history. And there are many subsections within this area, within this criterion, many areas. So for instance, one is education. So in Oakham, the old brick school is significant under criterion A as part of the history of education in Oakham. On the bottom, this array of particularly well-preserved triple deckers in Worcester is eligible under criterion A as part of the history of Worcester as it relates to immigration, labor history, industrial history. This is the period when Worcester was rapidly industrializing. People were moving to Worcester to work wherever in the factories, and they needed housing, and the buildings like this were built to house the workers. Criterion B deals with significant people. So for example, the Emily Dickinson House in Amherst is nationally significant for obvious reasons. And the locally significant example is the Ezra Carpenter House in Foxborough, which Ezra Carpenter was a hat maker. And so significant to the history of local small scale industry in his town. And he was a prominent individual in the town. And so it is significant under B for him. Criterion C has to do with design and construction. Just some examples here. The Baird House in Amherst. This is the only house in Massachusetts designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. And on the lower left, you have a very fine surviving example of a Greek Revival house in Harwich. And on the right, you have for engineering, you have the Golden Hill Bridge in Lee, an early lenticular truss bridge, which was demolished after it was listed, but the documentation was very useful for preservation planning purposes. Criterion D has to do with archaeology, either prehistoric or historic, and the potential of those things, the potential to tell stories about our past. A place does not have to be excavated to be significant under Criterion D. And an example here from the historic period is the remains of this blast furnace in Richmond in far western Mass. It's the Richmond Furnace Historic and Archaeological District. The idea being the potential here, if one were to excavate it, they would find out quite a lot about the industrial history of this area. Many eligible properties meet more than one criterion, as you might imagine. The Southborough district is being nominated under A and C. Here's an example that meets 3 of them. This is the Fellows Farmstead in Sheffield. It's an 18th century house that was the home of John Fellows, who was a brigadier general in the Massachusetts militia during the Revolutionary War. And it's eligible for his occupancy of it, for agriculture. It was a farm, for military significance because of his military significance, and for C because it's a very fine example of a vernacular Georgian farmhouse. So National Register nominations, they are the documents that support and argue for historic resources significance under whichever criteria are chosen. And they demonstrate that the resources retain sufficient integrity or character to be able to tell those stories that make them important. Here as an example, this is the Isaac Royal House in Medford. Now the house is a textbook. It's in every architectural history book of the United States, but it's not just the house that is so important, because those buildings on the right are where he housed more than 30 enslaved people. Those are the only surviving slave quarters in Massachusetts. So it's significant for far beyond the very fine Georgian house. There are many other stories there to be told. Nominations, just like Southborough's district, include components constructed over a wide range of time. So here in Dalton, you have an 1840s stone mill, and in the same district, you have a vet's village dating to the post-World War II period for GIs coming home. And collectively, they tell the story of Cranesville over a defined period of time, the period of significance. Nominations also include non-contributing resources, and those tend to be things built relatively recently outside the period of significance. Periods of significance tend to date to 50 years. They tend to end 50 years or more from the present. So anything generally 50 years or younger is going to be non-contributing. Or if something is old but has been dramatically altered, no longer reads as old or historic, then that also too can be non-contributing. So here you have a mix. You have a 19th century building on the right, and on the left, you have a 1970s building, which when this district was listed several decades ago was far too young to be considered a contributing building. Nowadays, we may have to reconsider that. Documentation that goes into a National Register nomination includes the narratives, a description section, a historic significance section. That's kind of the argument for why something is important. A district includes a data sheet that includes every resource, building, structure, site, or object in the district, and whether it is contributing or non-contributing, date of construction or alteration, etc. Maps, various maps include USGS maps, district maps, and photography. I'll go into this. And this gets to the heart of what the National Register is. National Register is it's a planning and documentation program fundamentally, right? And this is the meat of that. This is what goes into it and why it is a useful document. So to be listed, properties, they must be significant and they must retain their integrity, their historic character, as I've said. But in a district, they do not have to, they do not have to be perfectly preserved. So here's an example in New Bedford. All of these buildings are, from the same era, the second half of the 19th century, more or less. Not one of them is perfectly preserved. They all have modifications of some kind, right? Maybe it's replacement windows, maybe it's, asphalt shingle siding or asbestos siding, additions, but they still read as historic. They collectively read as an earlier streetscape. So collectively, they convey a historic significance. Buildings listed in the National Register, they don't have to serve their original purpose, right? So on the left, on the upper left is a former gas station, Colonial Beacon gas station. A number of these were built in the 20s in a kind of a ring around Boston. And they had these gold domes that were meant to imitate the gold dome of the State House. This one has been demolished. It was demolished a year or two ago, but for many years it was an ice cream parlor. And this very small former train station in Weston was a home for many years after it stopped being a train station. Buildings listed in the National Register do not have to be open to the public. That you're not turning a property into a museum. You're not turning it into a national park. It's still a privately owned property. It's just a historic designation. They do not have to be painted in particular colors. Here's an example in Chatham, a building from the first half of the 19th century, painted in varying shades of lime and yellow. And just on that note, a National Register district is not a local historic district. So all property owners in this district, among the documents they received from our office with their notification letter was a document called There's a Difference. And it goes into much more depth than this slide does about what the difference is between a National Register district and a local historic district. But there can be confusion because when something is said to be a historic district, it might not be clear whether you mean a local historic district or a National Register district. So the National Register districts, which is what we're talking about tonight, those are established through the National Park Service. They're listed by the Park Service as a formal recognition that a group of properties or a property or a thing, a structure, site, object is significant and worthy of preservation. There's no mandate to preserve, right? They can't tell you to do that. There's no review of any proposed modifications to National Register listed properties with private funds involved, unless there's some kind of state or federal involvement in a project, right? And review is administered by our office. Local historic districts are different. They're kind of a type of landmarking. They're established at the local level, depends on how town or city government works, whether it's a town or city. It can be through a 2/3 vote at town meeting. It can be through a city council vote. This comes with design review. And the earliest example of this in the country is in Charleston, and that's kind of where it started. So when a modification is proposed to a building, a feature that is visible from a public way and that meets a certain threshold, then that may trigger a review by the Historic District Commission. And that's what the design review is. It does come with regulations. And that can include demolition. It can prevent demolition. So what are some of the benefits of listing in the National Register? Well, here's a list. I'll go through many of these in a moment, but just some possibilities: pride, education, tourism, funding assistance, including CPA funding, and as a planning tool. So honor. Many communities with historic districts choose to erect signs as you enter or exit the district, or every road leading into the district has a sign. Some commissions and some private property owners put plaques on their homes or other buildings that are listed. As an example here, the Benjamin Clark House has been listed, placed on the National Register, built 1795. Now the Mass Historical Commission has no say over this. We don't advise on signage or anything. It's a local decision. You can do what you want as long as it meets local ordinances or bylaws for signs. And every property owner of an individually listed resource will get a certificate. For districts, the commission gets a certificate and property owners get a postcard when things are listed. As an education tool, some communities utilize the documentation that goes into a National Register nomination for an educational purpose. Some communities do walking tours or story maps nowadays with smartphones. Some communities have done a smartphone-based story map walks and things like that. There was also is a program called Teaching with Historic Places. Lowell has a number of these pamphlets, National Register walking tours, but even small towns like the town of Chesterfield in the hills of Western Massachusetts, they have a walking tour based on documentation done for their National Register district. Opportunities for funding. Properties that are owned by a nonprofit or a municipality are eligible for funding if listed in the National Register, because properties listed in the National Register of Massachusetts are automatically included in the State Register of Historic Places. The State Register is a compendium of resources with historic designations, and the National Register is one of the 8 that gets you listed. So the Massachusetts Preservation Projects Fund, which is administered by our office, is a grant program to which nonprofit and municipal buildings are eligible to apply for as a matching grant program. And Community Preservation Act funds could also potentially be used for National Register listed properties. And there are others out there. The 1772 Foundation now works in Massachusetts as with a matching grant program, and there may be others. For income producing properties, not nonprofit owned or municipally owned, but privately owned income producing properties, the tax credit, what's called the historic tax credit generally. There's a state and federal historic tax credit. National Register listed properties are eligible for both, and both of them are up to a 20% credit for qualified rehabilitation expenditures. So this is the tax credit is the single most effective preservation tool in the United States. It's a game changer for many buildings. It puts them over the threshold into viability, where otherwise something would be demolished. So income producing properties are eligible for this credit. As a planning tool, I kind of explained a little bit about how it could be useful as a planning tool in some ways. These are just a few examples. So in the late 1980s, the state hospitals in Massachusetts were closed, and there really wasn't a strong sense of what to do with many of them. Many of them were documented and listed in the National Register, including the Northampton State Hospital. And the documentation of it and the nomination and listing in the National Register was part of a planning process to try to find a new use for these buildings. Ultimately, the vast majority of these buildings were demolished, ending about 10, 15 years ago. But there was a hope that they could be saved, and part of that was by documenting the resources. In Falmouth Village, a state road runs through Falmouth Village, and a road widening scheme was proposed. And because it was listed in the National Register, they had a seat at the table, and they said, look, this is going to have an adverse effect on the character of our village green. And so there was a modification to the design as a result of that. With the Rockland Public Library, there was a proposed addition. They needed a large addition. And because it was listed in the National Register, they were able to work have a seat at the table with the design and kind of make a design that was deferential to, but reflective of the original architecture. Now, when something is listed in the National Register, these are public documents. You can find them on both in the National Archives and also on the Mass Historical Commission's website through our database called MACRIS, the Massachusetts Cultural Resource Information System. This is the new interface. I don't think it's public yet, but it will be shortly. And you can search for it and find it, download information, whatever. There's also a mapping platform, which I find very useful. It's MACRIS Maps, which if you want to find it, you just Google MACRIS Maps. It's the easiest way. And you can also find anything there and go to the record pages, download inventory forms, National Register nominations, whatever, for anywhere in Massachusetts. And so I just would end with saying that, National Register nominations, it's not just a top end thing. It's not just the state and federal offices that are working on it. It's very much working in conjunction with communities, especially districts, right? We're working with the local community. They come to us, right? We work with them on it, and something gets listed, and it's part of planning. It's an arm of planning, and it's for the goal of preservation. So for more information, you can contact us. You can also just go to our website and get in touch with us that way. So that's all I have.
Well, thank you, Ben. That was great.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have not seen a lot of those buildings. I thought I'd seen pretty much everything historical in Massachusetts, but wow. I particularly am sad about that dome-shaped gas station, though.
Yes, there are very few left. Another one was demolished in Woburn recently. Or maybe that one was in Woburn. There's two that were demolished recently. There's one on Mass Ave in Boston that still survives. It's fairly run down. But yeah, they're little buildings. People find them hard to repurpose, and they're often in areas that are desirable now to redevelop. So a little tiny gas station is not gonna survive most people.
I know, you make a great summer house or something. You can just move the dome. I think that's such a clever idea.
Yeah.
There used to be a great Gulf station, a very classical revival one in Harvard Square that was there for a long time, where the Inn at Harvard now is.
Oh.
another one of these, 1920s kind of, go motoring kind of structure.
Yeah, yeah.
Does anyone on the commission have any questions for our good sir here? No? Kevin's just grinning like a Cheshire cat, however. Totally happy about that. I'd like to throw it open to members of the public if they have any questions. I know we have some participants here. Does anyone want to raise a hand and ask Ben any questions? Oh, I have Kristen Connell. Go right ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
This is Kristen Connell from 15 Main Street in 2 House Court, 2 properties that are in the proposed district. We are adamantly opposed to this historic district.
Mhm.
We have Attorney Heiler is on the phone, and she will present for the Connells tonight. Sorry, you may have to activate her connection. Kathleen Heyer.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Attorney Kathleen Heyer. I'm with Pierce Atwood.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, all right, we're there? All right.
You're there.
Yes, my name's Kathleen Heyer. I'm with Pierce Atwood, and I'm representing the Connells tonight. As Kristen said, they own 15 Main Street, as well as other properties in Southborough. They're very strongly opposed to this designation. They don't want the property included, and we will be filing the requisite paperwork in writing directly to Mass Historical. But this seems like another effort to interfere with property owners' use of their own real estate. I think the commission knows the history with my clients. I doubt Mr. Haley does. But in short, my clients have recently gone through the demolition delay process, and through that process, it's become clear that this commission has been overstepping its bounds with respect to the demolition control bylaw. I believe your new town council recently said that he thinks that the past actions have been bordering on illegal. And my clients are very concerned that this simply provides another option for the commission to further interfere with property owners' development and redevelopment of their own property. They have no faith that this designation will be exercised in good faith. And they are concerned that this is in part an attempt to stop them from redeveloping their property pursuant to the demolition permit that they already have in hand. They also would like to see the redevelopment in a more modern dynamic of the downtown, and this designation will make it more difficult for businesses to come into the downtown because companies will not want to deal with having to go through the restrictions that are in place. And I understand that this is not intended to be as restrictive as a local district. However, the bylaw is not being enforced properly as is, and we just have no faith that this will not be also misutilized.
I'll just say that every property owner received 4 documents with the notification letter, one of which explains how you can object. So I assume you'll see your objection letter.
Yes, we will do that.
There's also one called Effects and Benefits of Listing in the National Register. I don't know if you have read that, but this is a federal designation. And as an attorney, you probably know that the federal government's police powers are pretty limited. How towns use National Register designations is indeed up to them. But as I've stated, private funds, someone doing anything to their property with private funding has absolutely nothing, has no restrictions on it at all. And also state or federal funding or permitting or licensing is what would trigger review by the state. And that's not determined by the historic designation. That's determined by the funding source. So something even in the inventory would be reviewed if there's state or federal involvement and without a historic designation. And all of the center of Southborough is in the inventory. So I can't speak to how a town will choose to use National Register designation, but it doesn't inherently come with restrictions. It can't. If towns choose to create restrictions based on National Register designations, then that is something that's up to the town. And it also can not happen, right? There are plenty of places, National Register buildings get demolished all the time. Buildings get demolished the moment they're listed in the National Register. So you're welcome to submit an objection. You don't even have to have a reason for objecting as long as it's notarized. So thanks for
Thank you very much.
Yep. Any other questions for anyone?
Michael, we can't hear you.
Just muted there. Doesn't seem like anyone else is raising their hand. I will just like to say that this designation has come with overwhelmingly positive response in Southborough. 10 years ago, when this was first proposed, the funding had to go through the CPC in order to hire the consultant. It passed overwhelmingly at town meeting, and it continues to enjoy the support of the vast majority of residents in this district. And as Ben has stated, you don't want in, opt out. So I think it's a pretty simple thing. I don't think that any allegations of property limitations are particularly valid. So that's all I would say from the commission standpoint. Anyone else? Seeing and hearing none. Ben, I would say you're excused.
All right.
All right, thank you very much.
Yes, thanks for having me. Yep.
It was a very enjoyable presentation. I really enjoyed seeing a lot of these pictures. I want to thank you again for all the great work that you do here and for all of our communities in Massachusetts. I know it's not often easy, and sometimes it's a little dispiriting, but on the whole, we're a much better state and community center for it. And we want to thank you again for all the work you guys do over there.
Sure.
Yeah,
and
well
go
done.
ahead. Thanks.
Okay.
And I'll just say, the September 8th meeting is also a public meeting. It's also going to be virtual. So you can go to the Mass Historical Commission's website to get the link. It's probably not up yet, but it will be closer to the date. Those meetings are always at 1 o'clock on Wednesdays. So September 8th is a Wednesday at 1 o'clock. There's also a public comment period there. And if you submit an objection letter or a letter of support, those are due by the date of the commission, meeting. And I will just note again that preservation is a tool. It's meant to be used positively. And as I hope my presentation demonstrated, there are actually potential benefits of many kinds, not just honorary, to property owners in the district. They can get the tax credit. If it's a municipality or nonprofit, they can be eligible for grants. So it has in the right hands and used correctly, it can have a very positive benefit to a community.
Absolutely. I mean, we've already benefited from that. I believe St. Mark's Church has already benefited from these grants.
Yep.
So the townhouse, I believe, was also potentially in the works, but there's a lot that can be done. So we're very, very grateful. And I just want to say publicly that we owe this all really to our dearly beloved and now deceased Kay Madison, who started this all and battled it through, despite some skepticism on the part of yours truly, because I thought, oh, this is just a honorific, it doesn't have any enforcement power. But I've learned the power of honor, and it's a really incredible thing. And I think it'll really give the Southborough Center something to be proud of. So thank you again.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
All right.
Take care, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, we're back to our regular meeting. The public meeting is now closed. Anything else from anybody? We need to meet again fairly soon. We've had a demolition delay permit application for, hang on, let me look.
22 Edgewood, I think.
I'm sorry?
22 Edgewood, I believe.
Yes, 22 Edgewood. I've had a considerable back and forth with the owner about this, who seems a very nice man, Mr. Kiley. And he has gone through the process laid out in the old rules and regulations and submitted an extremely well-organized and beautifully done packet, unlike other people who have not submitted the documentation correctly. And I think we will meet and take a look at this. They're asking for a demolition permit to demolish a 1910 or so house that is in somewhat of derelict condition. So I will forward those materials over to you. As I said, he prepared an absolutely spectacular packet with all the documentations, including appraisal and everything else. So I think it'll be fairly straightforward. We have 10 business days to respond to this, or we can let it go into abeyance. I think we probably don't want to make a habit of that. Let us go down. Let's see, we're on the 19th. Where would you like to meet about this? 10 business days gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, up to the 10th of September, or 2nd of September. How about Thursday, the 2nd of September?
I'll be away, but I can participate remotely if that's when we meet.
Well, I don't know what state Annie's going to be in, so we're getting down close to a quorum on this. I'm generally here right up through Labor Day. So does anyone have any preferences for this?
Next week is fine with me if it's not too soon for everybody else.
It's just, as long as we can get Mr. Kiley in, or we can just review the packet. I don't necessarily know that he has to come, but certainly he's welcome. How about next Thursday, the 26th?
Okay with me.
Here with me.
Yeah.
It's not great for me just because I'm getting somebody off to college on Saturday, the 28th. The following week would be better, but if not, I will do my darndest.
I can make it work for 1 week, Kate. That's right. That's good.
We could do Tuesday, the 31st. Does that work better for anybody?
Fine.
Jim, nodding up
Yeah.
and down. Okay.
I can make it work.
No, Kevin?
I'm sorry, I cannot do Tuesday the 31st.
Okay.
Monday? About Monday the 30th?
Monday the 30th, I can do.
Same.
Yeah. That would be fine with me. What about you, Jim?
I will be potentially on the move, but Wi-Fi work, or I can probably connect by phone if I'm traveling. I'll just be in a car locally, so it's not like I can't be on it.
Oh, okay. I'll leave it up to you guys to battle this out. What do you want to do? It's like everyone has something to do except me, seemingly.
Does
I'm just here working.
Wednesday the 1st work for everybody?
Wednesday the 1st.
I can't.
Can't do Wednesday the 1st. See, this is why we have to alter the demolition bylaw,
Exactly.
because if we're going to be able to 10 business days, this is kind of crazy.
Well, do I need to be on it in video? Because I'm pretty sure I'd get a cellular connection at least. If I'm not.
No, you don't have to be on video. I'll send you out the packet. Just take a look at it and see what you have to say. I'm not going to predispose anyone's opinion, but the house is in a pretty tough shape, and he wants to move back with his daughter and build a new house. So
I did go through the packet, and I did.
you did know.
Well done packet, and I could see his reasons for doing what he wants to do.
So that you got it all. Did she send it to everybody?
No, just you and I.
Okay, all right. So I will send it out to everybody. And we can take a look at this.
We can make Monday the 30th work. The only trick might be that if I'm supposed to start this whole Zoom session and all that, it might be a little tricky for me to do on the run.
Well, I can start the Zoom session, but we're going to have to get some information out of our dear new IT person, Jason, about this YouTube portion of it, because these instructions simply did not work. And I'm pretty good on YouTube. So I don't know. So where are we on all this? Who said they could not do the 30th? No one?
I'll be in motion, but I'll make it work.
Okay. In motion is fine. Kevin, you're okay with the 30th?
Yes.
Okay. Rebecca?
Yes, what time, Michael? 6 or 7?
6 o'clock. I mean, I'd like to, my goal on doing 6 o'clock, I was talking to Kevin about this yesterday because we were both at the EDC meeting, which started at 7:30. He said, oh, well, it's great because you have time to have some dinner. And I said, yeah, but it takes up your whole damn night and you're tired. So I'd rather do these things at 6 if that's all right with you guys, because, hopefully we generally are in and out in an hour. And then you can go on to have the rest of your evenings. Am I thinking that's not correct?
Fine.
Okay.
I can do it.
Okay. All right. Well, then let's set 6 o'clock on the 30th as the next meeting, and we'll let Annie know. 6 p.m. I don't know. She's probably going to be in Grand Babyville by then, so I don't know. We'll see with a newborn.
So this will be the only thing on the agenda, Michael?
Well, I'll put the standard disclaimer. I don't think we want to.
Yeah, no, but the goal is just this demo. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're meeting just for this demo. I mean, I can put initial discussion of the bylaw on there if you want. Do you think?
No, that wasn't that. I was just curious.
Okay.
Just a busy couple of weeks coming up. That's why I'm just trying to gauge the time of it.
Yeah, I mean, our next scheduled meeting is on the 16th of September, which is what I'm proposing, will be proposing to meet with town council about this. So that I would think would be our meeting. I don't know, Kevin, I don't know if were you here when we set this schedule? 16th at 6?
That's okay with, yes, that's okay with me.
Okay. Okay, good. All right. So then I think we're all set here. Anything else? Anybody have any other?
I do. I just want to kind of, so I'm clear in my head and we can clear the decks on a couple things. First of all, we're still in open session, correct?
Yes, we're still going. I expect, okay. At least I think we are, because it still says recording.
Well, they're two separate things. I'm not sure which order to address them. One, we had on the agenda approval of meeting minutes from the June meeting, which we haven't addressed.
Thank you.
And that's a concern. I think it's something that we should spend a couple minutes on. And then secondly, I'm just processing and thinking about the documents about redraft of the DDBL and the rules and regulations and all that stuff. And it would be helpful, as Jim said, to get the document with the revision markings enabled, because I sat down this afternoon and spent kind of with two screens, like looking at the existing bylaw and the language that has emerged to revise it. And then of course the old regs have been pulled. I didn't have anything to compare those to except my memory, having read them.
Yeah, I don't have a copy either, because I'm not sure what
right. They've vanished. So that's okay. We have to deal with, work with what we have. And like I said earlier, I'm fine with, on the one hand, I just would like to get a little, talk this through, if I may, a moment. I'm fine with, trying to submit them to Mr. Tallerman for his review. My own, and again, as a way of expediting the process, my own you know, run through them this afternoon, I have concerns, and you know, the only caution I feel is that if we put them up as the proposed draft minutes,
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Are we talking about the minutes? Or are we talking about the?
I'm sorry, I apologize. Let me roll it back. If we put up the proposed draft documents of the revised DDBL and these draft rules and regulations, I worry about, I think I can anticipate, let's put it this way, the response from town council on some points. And I wonder if we might not be better served to try to tidy them up ourselves first, before a release. You know, I'm just trying to find the smoothest, most effective path to something that will work for us. And so again, I'm open-minded. I don't have, this is not a kind of sub rosa way of trying to get my way or anything. I'm thinking,
we are unanimous here. You know,
right,
I don't think we've ever had a split vote, except when Rebecca and I were the only two people to vote for the original demolition delay bylaw, and everyone else chickened out.
Well, I just think, you know, my own kind of, again, review of it, I won't get into the details of it, but I don't know. And if putting them in front of, you know, Jay Tallerman can expedite where I think we need to go, I'm all for it, because ultimately they have to pass muster with him. So if that's a quicker way to get there, I mean, I don't need to have my paw prints on it. I'm just offering up the opinion that, based on my own, of course, non-legal review of them, I see some issues. And given the volatility of, you know, the situation, I just thought I'd put it out there to figure out what is the best way we can do this.
Well, I can tell you the way that Mark Purple told us to do this, which was to talk to Jay Tallerman first.
Good. But all I thought was I would be amenable, for instance, to sitting down at a table with him, I guess appropriately masked, because we've got that.
Well, not coming. No, we're all now, you know, meeting.
Right. Well, I mean, if you're in town hall, you have to wear a mask. But I'm just saying, like, I long to sit down as a group with Mr. Tallerman, with the documents on the table, and like do the hard pencil work line by line, you know, to get to where we need to be. And so I just feel some concern about publishing draft documents that may sort of be a little bit of gas on what's now a sort of smoldering issue. That's all. And I
didn't think they were that controversial, frankly. But I mean, I think that this is something that the changes that we are proposing are stuff that we've talked about, you know, forever. You know, I don't, look, I mean, Kate, are we obligated, now that we've talked about this, to put these things onto the, you know, put these things into the minutes?
I don't, to include the documents, we didn't share them on screen. We didn't discuss them in detail. I do not believe they count as technically a used document. So no, I don't believe that they need to be attached. If I were doing it as a recording secretary for planning board, nobody put them up on the screen or anything like that, I wouldn't attach them to the minutes. But I only send them when they're approved also, which is usually a month out. So
yeah, well, the minutes have to be approved. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah, listen, I don't care. You know, whatever you guys think is fine. I just will on it just.
Well, they're not going to be posted anywhere until they are approved, correct?
Yeah, let's put it this way. I mean, when I was going to talk to Mark Purple, I was going to attach these documents to the request to say this is what we wanted to discuss with him. I've already told them that we have a draft of these things, and that, to my mind, it would be most expeditious to take this from a point of departure to the next place, as opposed to starting, with tabula rasa and saying, okay, Mr. Dalman, what do you think this should look like? I mean, because we went through considerable issues the first time around to get this stuff drafted with the first TDBL, and now with these changes. I mean, on the other hand, we can debate whether or not you as a commission endorse these changes. I mean, because this is a product of what I've produced. You may or may not be in agreement with some of these issues, and they want to have a whack at them without hopefully disrupting the legal language.
Michael, let me jump in. I think all Kevin's suggesting is that if we don't have to publish these things out until we're ready to say this is our agreed draft, and having town council look at it as part of that refinement process. He's saying let's not just throw it out there and make it part of the public record. If Kate and I would, but I'm not an expert saying on this process, but it sounds very reasonable that because we didn't review these in any detail, we've just mentioned them, and that they're being worked, that we agreed that the next step would be town council will take a look at them. We wait until such time as we've got a workable, mutually agreed draft before we put it out to the public. That's I
Agree.
Yeah, what I'm saying is, just for the record, I received them yesterday or today or yesterday, I think. They were sent, and I read them. I presume everybody's read them, but we haven't discussed them at all. Right. So, but prior to publishing them publicly, even as draft documents, I would be in favor of sending them to Mr. Tallerman, letting him have a whack, and then let's come back and talk about it together or in concert with Mr. Tallerman and hack out our own individual objections, because I admit I have some reservations on a couple of points, and that I think we can, resolve. But I would be in favor of that process before, if it's possible and within the bounds of open meeting regulations, to have a more thoroughgoing examination of the documents before we publish them as this is what we want, because I'm not sure it is what we want. I think we will be able to come up working together with a better product.
Listen,
I understand that was the process that we were going to take.
Okay,
that I think that the draft initially has to go to town council for review, and then that the next step was that we were going to all meet together via Zoom or in person to discuss it, because we have to do it in a public meeting anyway. So, and I don't believe we have to at this point, on the town website or anything. No drafts need to be posted. So I think our first step is just that we have to have special, town council review, and then we will meet to discuss our individual feedback as well as the feedback from Attorney Tallerman. That's my understanding. If I'm wrong.
Works for me.
Yeah,
I'm totally fine with that. Listen, my only goal here over the next year is never have to hear the word rogue commission out of another Board of Selectmen member. So I just want to make sure, in doing my suggestion in doing this, was simply to be as absolutely transparent as possible. But if this level of transparency actually creates obfuscation or problems, then it's probably best. So I will go along with the consensus here, and we will put those up for public review next time after we discuss them. Or people can come in and watch our meeting and hear us discuss them live if they wish. Does that sound amenable to everybody? Okay. Do we need to vote on that, Kate?
Well, I think that was, and Kevin, maybe I wasn't clear earlier, because I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying. And that's why I made the motion earlier that we give Michael approval to submit a draft, as chair, to submit the draft for town council review. Because I think that really has to be our next step, is to get some feedback and then begin the discussion process with town council. So it's my understanding that my earlier motion tonight, that's what, that was my goal.
I'm sorry if I misunderstood, Kate. I think it works for me because I'm just guessing, like I said, that some of town council's objections will coincide with my own non-legal reservations, and so let's see. Let's put it to them and let's see.
Yeah.
So I'm all for it.
Okay.
I think it gives us just a good start, like, unless we flipped it. And, at our next meeting, we went line by line to discuss it. But I know part of my concern with this whole process is that I'm not an attorney, at all. And so the way that my brain worked was to give that rough draft to town council, get that legalese and feedback so that then we can talk as a commission. And then I would say, well, this is my understanding as just average Joe, and and then some concerns about maybe how I think it comes across the perception, and then have the attorney, Attorney Tellerman, give us his feedback. So that was sort of where I was coming from too. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Now back to the minutes. Kevin?
The minutes that there was a public records request for, that we all reviewed, that you had to submit a draft for, because otherwise I didn't receive any new minutes today.
No, those are the minutes that have already been posted and are up online. This would simply be a vote to change their designation from draft to approved and let them do what they need to do.
Okay.
So do I have a motion to that extent? Or I see Mr. Miller saying something. I know what you're going to say. I can bet I know what you're going to say.
Oh, all right. Well, can I say it anyway, or?
Yeah, sure. He wants me to strike out. He wants me to strike out a certain comment in that.
Well, there's a, I've given this a lot of thought, and I guess, I don't want to.
Well, they're up already.
This is right. They're right. They're up already, and but the final approval is sort of codifying the rhetoric as a matter of record. And, the way I think about it is, if hypothetical, if somebody, steps on my toe accidentally or on purpose, at the time, I'm quite agitated. And let's say my toe was already a little sore and somebody stepped on it. And I yell out at the time.
Are you implying, sir, I have foot problems?
No, I'm this is the hypothetical I do. But you dirty so-and-so, I don't, and I am beyond outraged. And and a day later, you're still feeling pretty annoyed, but it's a matter of.
Oh, it wasn't a day later. It was a week later, and I'm still annoyed.
Right, and the rhetoric that applies to that, and you say, this is someone that I meet on the street all the time, and maybe the offense was inadvertent, and maybe it was purposeful. I don't know, but we have to do business together on a regular basis, and I can, a week later, I might soften it to, well, that was annoying. And then a couple of weeks after that, it might be, well, that was inconvenient that somebody trod on my toe. But ultimately,
it doesn't soften at all.
When I record it for all time, do I want to put it, I want to be accurate to the feeling at the time. You're obliged to do so. Truth and minute keeping. However, I'm not sure if reminding as a matter of public record that in the same rhetorical terms that you felt hurt at the time is useful to a kind of productive further relationship. And I guess,
I will say that I didn't feel hurt at the time. I felt offended and embarrassed for all of Southborough by the comments of one of our public officials. So, and I think that needs to be put into the record. However, if the rest of you,
for a sec?
yes,
Can I add?
yes,
So you all know I sit in a lot of meetings as a recording secretary, and it is a challenge because, and I will say from my 3 years of being a recording secretary, overall, I know that there are lots of strong personalities and there are people that say things in heated moments, but the majority of the people that are volunteering have the same good intentions that we all do. Agree or disagree, they have intentions they're very passionate about. My job as a recording secretary is to make sure that it is accurately recorded, but I remove all inflammatory language from public comment, because there's people that, attend meetings and are emotional and are upset. And I agree with Kevin that these are saved forever, and you definitely can send the message, but it's important to make sure that the rhetoric and the inflammatory language is appropriate for being preserved in perpetuity. I don't remember in particular what Kevin might be referring to be completely honest, but I'm just saying it is an important part of the minutes, I will say.
he's referring to the passage where I said that if Mr. Healy wants to start apologizing, he should start apologizing for himself. Because he had said, I have been apologizing to everybody at Southborough for the behavior of the commission. It's like, no, you should apologize for your own misbehavior here, which has been particularly egregious and embarrassing to all of Southborough. But,
no, I would agree with Kevin on this point, though, that's not necessarily minutes, right? That minutes are going to summarize sort of what happened. And I don't think we need to add fuel to the fire at this point either.
That's fine. That's fine. I'm not going to argue this. I've already said, and you know my feelings on it. I'll tell you, how about this? I move that we send the minutes back to either Kate or Kevin, have them altered in whatever ways you wish to have them altered, and then we'll bring them back for final approval next time on the, where are we? Wherever we just said. 16th? No, sorry.
Or the 30th, you want to make it a quick.
30th. Yeah, 30th.
Yeah.
We'll just put in a quick agenda item on the 30th.
Yeah.
Does that sound?
Mhm.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to that effect.
I move that we update the minutes and look at them on the 30th.
Very good. Second?
Second.
Rebecca Deans-Rowe,
Yes.
Mr. Jim Blaschke,
Yes.
Mr. Kevin Miller,
Yes.
Ms. Kate Battles,
Yes.
and Mr. Whiteside abstains. There you go.
And with very great appreciation and thanks for the indulgence and the patience and even the abstention. Which,
No, listen, we do things here by consensus, and that's the only way this thing really needs to go forward, because we have enough external enemies.
well,
We can't have any discord, within our group, right? And besides, we're all happy campers.
I completely agree, and I think we're on a good path. I think we're in a sort of what I would characterize as a kind of healing cycle, and I think it's going to be good for all concerned, on and off the board and in relations with other boards. So that's sort of it's the only motive I have in pressing the point.
No, it's fine. I will just also say that I think our relations with all the other boards are pretty good, except with one or two individuals on the board of selectmen. But that being said, perhaps we can change their minds too. I'm certainly open.
My goal is to get all, like 100%. We're all together.
Oh my God, you have not lived in Southborough long enough.
Well,
There's never consensus in this town. This is a town of disagreements.
This may be the optimism of my non-youth, but I'm clinging to it.
Well, God, we all need a little optimism in the world. So
Right. And
Amen.
onward and upward with the arts and with the historical commission, I say. So.
Amen to you, brother. Amen.
Yeah, I'll add a little funny anecdote for a second about getting your toes stepped on. I smashed my foot one time in the dark, and I didn't have it attended to. And now when I see that fourth toe on my right foot, every time I see it, it reminds me of a unpleasant experience. So I think I agree with Kate. Let's keep the business in the minutes and keep any personality stuff out. That would be my request in the interest of just keeping it all level.
And it's hard. I do understand. I've been in these meetings too. I get it, but I hear what Kevin's saying too.
I was just watching, oh God, what is the title of that crazy thing on Netflix with Tomlinson? You know what I'm talking about? With Lily Tomlin and
Grace.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, the new episodes are on, and Lily says to Grace, she says, "You know, half of life is just showing up and learning how to shut up." So maybe that's my new motto. Anyway, so on that note, dear friends, I think that unless you have anything else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Just one question. There was a letter from a Ray Hodgkins, I think it was, about the business district expansion.
Right.
He said he was going to send it to the planning board and copy the selectmen and us. Just process question, what happens to that type of a statement? Does that get heard anywhere?
The planning board discussed it briefly, just did what you did. It just noted that they had received the email, which we can add to our minutes, Dave, too, is that the Historical Commission received the email from Mr. Hokinson regarding several of the properties that wanted to be included in the downtown business village district. Planning board said just that. And Mr. Hokinson was on earlier, and he did also attend the planning board meeting and spoke briefly, but that's typically where it's at. If he wanted to discuss it publicly, then he can also get on the meeting and do that with us. But it was good to acknowledge that we were in receipt of that email for the minutes.
Oh, for the minutes, yes. I do acknowledge all emails we get, by the way. I do send thank you for your email.
Yep.
Thanks. So to make sure that everyone who writes us, and I try to do that within a couple of hours of getting it, so that people understand that we're responsive to whatever they're talking about. All right.
I just have one last thing, maybe before we go, and that is I'm trying to process the appearance of the person opposing and her attorney, the National Registry designation, and I'm sorry, Ben. Gosh, I'm forgetting his name. It's terrible.
Ben Halley.
Ben, yeah. Oh God, he was just wonderful. I want to thank him personally. I mean, I was, again, I have a rooting interest, but I was kind of riveted and loved the presentation. And he made it very clear, as the documentation that went out to all everybody in the proposed district, that in fact, this designation doesn't give us any power, doesn't grant us anything, doesn't come with any strings. You can still vinyl side your house and paint it purple if you want, or do whatever you want, or tear it down. And I regard the homeowner and her attorney's comments. I don't make any judgment. It makes me a little sad as a sort of coda to business that is already, so far as the Historical Commission is concerned, is concluded. But I worry, and I'm sorry that they're not still here, because I would have liked to address them at the time. I just was kind of processing my own thoughts. That I want to be clear, or make sure that our messaging is clear, that in fact, I think it is very clear in the documentation, but whether they're there was no response from us, and I didn't think it was really appropriate for anyone to, I didn't want to engage in a debate. It's an emotional thing for them, and I understand it. But I also want to make sure that this National Registry thing is conveyed in the clearest, least ambiguous way possible, that in fact it can only convey benefits, and it doesn't hand us any power whatsoever. You know, and I just throw that out there if anybody had a thought on that. I don't really know what to do about it, or if anything need be done, really. I don't want to, I certainly don't want to get into any kind of, you know, back and forth. It's probably just better to let people speak.
Well, you know, so here's the story from our perspective. We're done with 15 Main Street and Connells or Canals or however that's pronounced. They got their demolition permit. They can do whatever they want.
Right.
They went through their 9 months. They weren't harmed in any way. They got their permit. They're now free to go. Do I think that the demolition of the historic Newton Homestead is a great thing for Southborough? No, I do not. But that's my personal opinion. You know, what can I say?
Can I add that when we were first meeting with the people downtown that would be affected by the district, the thing that Kate and I tried to convey over and over again is there's no downside to this. There's no downside at all to the historic district.
I just wonder if, for instance, you know, Ben talked, I was very interested in his talk about educational purposes and walking tours and story maps and all this stuff. And it actually meshes exceptionally well with some points that I've heard on Board of Selectmen calls about their desire to sort of.
And it's in hand. I mean, it's in hand, but via the Historical Society, because we have money to do it.
So I think it's like, I'm so kind of excited by it. And I just want to, I just wonder if there's any sort of outreach we should do, you know, in the coming couple of weeks, just to get as many people to sort of understand what it means and what the possibilities are. Like, you know, I don't know if Mr. Stivers is still on the call. I think he might be. I would think all the BOS members would be absolutely thrilled with that aspect of it, among others, you know, and I hope that, I hope we get it. I think we're going to get it. We, meaning the town. And when the town of Southborough does get this sort of designation, and there are 352 towns in Massachusetts, and there's 1,700 districts, and we don't have one yet. How is this possible?
It will elevate the whole town, I think.
That's exactly right. Now is the time, and you know, the time is now. And so I mean, I want to seize it. And once we get it, again, we as every citizen of this town, we should really strive to sort of make some hay out of it in a very positive way that makes people like the you know, person that spoke out against it feel good. You know, I want them to feel good about it, and ultimately, I want them to go, oh, I'm kind of glad and I'm happy and I'm proud, even if my house that was part of one of the slides is gone. Okay, that's fine. But I hope someday, I mean, I really mean this quite sincerely. I hope one day to, you know, run across that homeowner and have them say, yeah, it's pretty good, you know?
Well, that's definitely not what they expressed this evening. And
well,
I think overly optimistic on that account as well. But who knows? I could be wrong. But in any event, we will run with it. And again, as these folks are able to opt out with a simple notified letter, which doesn't affect the integrity of the district, I'm sure it'll be a very few people. The votes generally by this stage are pretty pro forma. So I don't anticipate seeing any huge problem. And again, as I said, you know, from all the way along the line, we've had positive feedback from by far the majority of people. I think this objection has a lot more to do with the downtown zoning district than it does with the National Register as being some sort of additional overlay. We've said again and again, that's not the case. It has no legal basis and the homeowner can opt out. So I think we've done as much as we can do with this, and you know, we've done our best here, and I think that's all we can do.
Yeah, I just like I said, I look forward to us.
I look forward to, and exuding our PR role of historic preservationists, and getting back into Heritage Day and doing, our activities and promotions and graveyard tours and all the things that we used to do before COVID came along. So yeah, I think this has been a bit of a negative PR patch, which has been very disheartening to me, and I know you as well. However, that being said, I think, everything seems, all stations go. We have the money in the Historical Society to start laying out this tour. We're going to develop the prototype of this. I've already been working on it with Patty Fiore of the placards. We've looked at various materials and things. We have a sample text. John Del Pascoli has indicated that he will be the interested first party and will also help fund it. He will also put it on private land, which will give us an easy way to have people come and look at it as a prototype for various places in town when they go to the Board of Selectmen and say, hey, do you agree with putting these up around? So I think, I think all things are go. I think, I think all things are go. So,
Okay.
now I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion that we adjourn.
Rebecca Deans Rowe motions. Do I hear a second? I'll second.
right.
I
You
get a second. In small meetings like this, I get to second. So I want to thank everyone. I want to thank our new vice chair for all his participation. I look forward to working with him on this, and also our various efforts with the downtown. I should also just say,
Can I say, Michael, by the way, that I'm eternally grateful to you and Rebecca and Kate and Jim and Annie, God bless her, and a healthy baby, for the sort of faith that you're putting in me on credit, because I haven't done a damn thing yet to merit it, but you've given it to me anyway. So I'm going to do my darndest to earn what I've been advanced. So thanks a lot.
No, thanks for standing in for it. We appreciate it.
And I'd argue that based on all your participation in so many other town meetings, you have wholeheartedly earned it.
not to mention his wife is now an advisory. So this is a very political family. There may be a new dynasty forming here in Southborough. All right, folks, on that, we are adjourned. Good night.
Yeah.
God bless. Godspeed. Stay safe. Wear your mask. Do everything you're supposed to do. And I'll see you back here on the, whatever day, on the 30th of August at 6 p.m.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers all. Bye.
Hi, Joe.